Welcome back, and we're now going to talk about the state of affairs in the Greek peninsula with the invasion of Xerxes, the second Persian invasion in the Greek-Persian Wars that we're looking at this week. And the Greeks are worried about Xerxes' invasion with this huge army, and for once they try and unite together to defeat the Persians. And at least a third of the Greek city-states say, you know what? We'd rather be ruled by the Persians. We'd rather be ruled by the Persians than, the Spartans, who seem to be kind of scary and have kind of a totalitarian approach, and the Athenians, who have this crazy democracy. We're not convinced that we like that. And so these cities instead accept Persian sovereignty. In fact, matters looked so desperate that the Athenians, who were typically rivals of the Spartans, even allowed the Spartans to have full control over the military. The Spartans, as has been famously recounted in many other places, decide to meet the Persians at the site in Thermopylae. This narrow pass, and you can see it here. It is the route into mainland Greece, the route into Thebes and Athens, and so the Spartans established themselves there. There's a sense now that this was always a suicide mission, that it was always understood that the Spartans were sacrificing themselves. More and more historians suggest that that might not actually be the case, that the Spartans actually had a decent chance of holding the Persians here. The pass was so narrow, the Greeks had more robust weapons than the Persians, and so they consistently defeated the Persians in huge numbers at close quarters, as they had found out at Marathon. Eventually, however, the Spartans are surrounded and killed. A traitor tells the Persians how they can surround the Spartans. The Spartans send all the rest of their allies away, and the 300 of them, again, it's a very famous story, they fight on until the death, and they send this famous message to the Spartans, and they say, we are going to die here, obedient to the orders of the people of Sparta. And so what you see here, which is perhaps one of the interesting differences between a Greek approach, which is kind of seen as the origins of a Western approach to government and public service, and more of a Persian and more of an Eastern approach. The Spartans see themselves as serving the Spartan people by sacrificing their lives and dying in this place as they do. For the Persians, it's about being obedient to the emperor. It's more of kind of like a top-down approach. But with Sparta, we see this kind of bottom-up, just like we're seeing democracy in Athens. And it stems from this individuality, this culture of individuality that is so valued by the Greeks, that they see themselves as obeying even the ordinary citizens of their society. Now, as I've written here, although the Spartans die, their sacrifice wins the inspiration of the rest of the Greek city-states, who now decide that they should unite and fight together against the Persians. Now, of course, doesn't change overnight. That's easier said than done. The Persians, are now rolling through Greece. They have a very big army, and the Greeks retreat. They're not ready to make a stand against the Persians. They've got to put together a huge force in order to match this force of 250,000 soldiers, although the Spartans have kind of helped the odds a little bit. And so the Greeks retreat, and even the city of Athens, which had always held out. Remember the Dark Ages when the Dorians came into Greece, Athens was the city that held out. Not this time. This time the Persians capture Athens, and they do exactly the same thing that they to Miletus. They destroy it. They burn the city to the ground. And so matters now look pretty desperate. You have Sparta's down in here, but much of the main population center of Greece has now been taken over by the Persians. At this point, the Persians could probably have waited out the Greeks. They probably could just have sat in Athens. That's what military historians suggest now. The best action for the Persians at this point would have been to do nothing. Don't risk another battle. Let the Greeks come and try and fight you. Good luck with that. Good luck attacking the Persians in the fortified city of Athens. Instead, the Persians continue to fight on, and this is now seen as a strategic error. Themistocles is able to provoke them into a naval battle, where the Greeks have an advantage. The Greeks, and especially the Athenians, have an advantage because they've built this navy. They've invested in defending themselves by building this new state-of-the-art navy. And so Themistocles is able to provoke the Persians into attacking the Greek navy. He sends someone into the Persian camp who pretends to be a deserter, and he says, you know how the Greeks are all about individuality, they can never get along with each other, and they can't agree to fight together in their navy, and their fleet is splitting up, and some of them are leaving tomorrow. And if you attack them, they're probably just going to fall apart, because they don't know whether they're fighting together or whether they're trying to leave. And so the Persians attack the Greek ships in the Straits of Salamis. And then suddenly they find that these Greek ships that they thought were leaving are actually staying to fight. And they've got trapped in this battle in close quarters. And it becomes a great defeat. A defeat in which the Persians lose 200 ships and the Athenians only 40. And so now you have a situation in which Xerxes' expedition is compromised. It's going to take a very long time for him to resupply his army by land. And he's not now willing to venture into the sea because much of his fleet has been destroyed. A significant part of his fleet has been destroyed, and he doesn't want to fight another naval battle with the Athenians. And so now peace actually stuck. And suddenly fortune has turned in favor of the Greeks, and they are successful in following up their victories. The Battle of Mycale, you see here, I don't think this one's on your map, but it's another important naval victory because the Athenians win another victory at sea, and this time it's not in the narrow Straits of Salamis, it's out in the open. And at this point Xerxes says, no more naval battles. And basically he says to his army, I've given you enough troops. Finish the job off. But the difference now is that the Greek city-states are united. And so now, with the losses that the Persians have suffered, they've been campaigning for a couple of years at this point, they're able almost to have equal numbers with the Persians. I say almost equal numbers. It's more like 2-1 rather than 10-1. But as I said before, the Greeks have the better weapons in close hand-to-hand combat. They're always more successful. And so at the Battle of Plataea, where the Greeks are only outnumbered 2-1, they are able to resoundingly defeat the Persians. And this brings to an end Persian efforts to invade and to defeat the Greeks. And this is seen as one of the proudest, the finest moments in Greek history. That these Greek city-states that were pretty unstable, that were pretty divided, are able to come together, they're able to unite, they're able to defend themselves against the Persians. But what's the value of this victory? Remember, the Persians, if you didn't mess with them, were seen to be pretty balanced people to rule over you. Wouldn't it be good to have the enlightened Persians with all this scientific knowledge of the Middle East, with all the trade from the Middle East? Wouldn't that be a good thing for the Greeks to have? What are the values that the Greeks hold which mean they resist and are willing to sacrifice and die in this way? In the end, it's this idea, this emerging idea of freedom, which is going to become such an important buzzword, such an important value for Western civilization. This is really one of the first places where we really see it emphasized. That for the Greeks, it is more important that they maintain their own identity and their ability to control their lives than it is to be ruled by the Persians, even if the Persians are not the worst people to be ruled by. It is better to have your freedom. That is the decision that the Athenians and the Spartans and these other Greek city-states make together. Okay, I'm going to come back with a couple more videos in which we talk about the next war that comes after the Persian Wars. The Greeks have achieved a great triumph, but trouble is still brewing. Challenges still lie ahead for this emerging civilization.